The budget town council meeting to order at 6:31. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Peter Talbot,
Here.
Jim Jenks,
Here.
Dina Allard,
Here.
Patricia Kramer, Fiona Pearson, John Mylone,
Here.
Greg Wolf,
Here.
Don Walsh,
Here.
and David Belver.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Rise and join me in the pledge, please. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, we're all ready to item number 3. We're cruising right along. I want to thank not only Public Works, but obviously our friends from Wastewater for hosting us this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to our budget chair, Mr. Jenks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for hosting us. I didn't realize it was going to be quite so warm, but yeah, this is doing this and the library and the firehouse and stuff is kind of a way I think to kind of bring the budget to life a little bit, and also sort of to the extent that people are watching, see that we have more than just one room in town, more than just the council chambers. Yeah, so Dan, if you would please begin to take us through Public Works.
Certainly, I'd like to start with is a short PowerPoint presentation that highlights some of the major changes, and then if it suits the council to go through items specific of interest, we can certainly jump into those. Obviously, just start off.
Once we do, it'll be page 117, just to orient folks in there.
So, just a quick overview is the Public Works line. We're looking at an increase of 4.78%, or $361,232 in the proposed budget, and public properties a 6.5% increase, or $86,217 over the previous year's operating budget. Jumping in a little bit deeper into the Public Works budget summary. We represented here just for a little bit of a presentation purpose is both the increases and reductions that were offered by line, by category, and the percentage of change, and also the percentage of the overall budget. The items in red represent items where we've ended up at an actual reduction over last year's budget. And then the reductions offered on each line offset some of the total increases for a net change what would have been higher without those offered reductions. We're looking at the highest percentages of increase. Obviously, focus comes to the solid waste line and the grounds line with the major increases. Grounds, a lot of that has to do with the cost of the utilities associated with the grounds and the water for irrigation for the fields and upkeep and maintenance associated with the sport fields that we have. Big part, obviously, the largest increase that we're seeing this year is in the solid waste line. The increases in that budget relate to overtime. We are carrying additional overtime in anticipation for offering solid waste, bulky waste drop-off at the transfer station in lieu of a curbside bulky collection. That anticipation has the increase to the overtime line. With that, we also are obviously in negotiations with AJ for the extension of the contract, and the rest of the increases associated with the solid waste line increases are with the tipping fees, recycling fees, and again, the bulky waste tonnage that we're anticipating as part of that Saturday collection in tandem with the continued support of the electronics and mattress recycling event.
Yeah, when you said the increase to the overtime line in terms of the book, is that the
That's the
First-
solid
first
waste,
one?
the first line,
Page
correct?
126.
5105?
Page 126 is solid waste. Yeah, we kind of
Yeah.
jumped a little bit. We can go back to the book, but solid waste has its own budget section,
Yeah.
page 120, really 125 and 126, but
Oh, I see, okay.
actually no.
It has its own
126.
specific overtime line for those. That started last year with funding that supported the electronics and mattress recycling events. If we do introduce the bulky waste collection as part of those events, we will need to have additional staff on site to help folks make sure that they're putting things in the right bins. We will not only have a bulky bin, but we'll actually have a metal bin, and we want folks there to actually help to make sure anything that has metal on it, it's actually thrown into the bin. Metal, we actually do receive a revenue stream from if we can collect that.
So the cost of that added over time, you see, the original 8,388 you see there for this year, that has supported the monthly
Mattress
drop-off
and
mattress and electronics. Solid Waste, Sustainability Committee has contemplated expanding that to include bulky waste, again, as Dan said, in lieu of a townwide curbside bulky waste, just given the costs. The overtime amount is again about $10,000 increase there, that's why it's at $18,000, about $9,000 or $10,000. And the total that we're carrying as an estimate, this will be our first year doing it, because we don't know tonnage, we don't have a lot to predict with. However, we're estimating probably around $50,000.
Yes, and that's based on a 30-yard container filled up once a month on Saturdays at $125 a ton.
For
And that
disposal.
interprets to close to $50,000.
So we're gonna do it one Saturday a month?
That would be in tandem, I mean, the plan, the way it's, proposed, right, and it is to do it in tandem with the monthly mattress and electronics recycling events, in order to, I think, both reduce any confusion from residents. If you had bulky one day, one Saturday, and the mattress, you're gonna get a crossover no matter what. So it would be in tandem with those events, and again, the $50,000 in anticipated cost for its bulky waste itself, in the roughly $9,000 we'll call it for overtime, is considerably lower than your bulky collection, which you'd anticipated closer to $255,000 to $280,000, and that's a one-time event. Whereas offering it year-round has its benefits, and it can become part of the long-term program. If we were to continue with the mattress and electronics that we've been doing at this.
So you're saying it's not just gonna be spring, summer, fall? It's
I
gonna-
would say to do it year-round in tandem again with the events that we've been having, which have been extremely well received. They've been successful. Regular flows kind of pretty static in the amount that we're collecting. I would have expected it to fall off more than it did, but it's been pretty consistent month after month with the amount, especially electronics that we've been getting. So again, it's well received. We collect the grass clippings, we're collecting branches we're allowing now. And this would be, again, an opportunity to provide an alternate to bulky waste, curbside collection, which we obviously done on a basis that this year would align with for being the year for that collection. And then it was.
And just to that point, to Don's question, I think if we certainly, it's all open to, ultimately the council's decision as to how much more collection events, less, we can calculate how you like. But if we did less, or say didn't do the winter as we kind of contemplated, you're gonna save on the overtime. Remember, that's $10,000 for the year, so you're probably only saving a couple $1,000s. It's harder to predict how much you'd save on the tonnage, because theoretically, the people have
Tonnage
things to
is
dispose,
Yeah.
they will just hold it for 3 months, and then when it picks up again, they'll dispose it. So a little cautious about cutting that by, let's say, a quarter, because the assumption probably wouldn't hold out. But again, that one, just to be clear, that tonnage is very much an estimate.
Right.
It's a very
Nobody knows
informed
that.
one,
Right.
but we just don't know. And we're kind of backing into it a little bit. But because we're not doing curbside, we recognize it's also, by definition, a little harder to get for some folks there. So you should expect the tonnage to be a little lower. But we think it's a good number. But the first year would be the best one.
And that's the 50,000.
It's actually built, it's not that exact one, it's actually built into the collection tonnage here. We'll probably break it out for
Well,
you.
it's not the
separate.
50,000.
It's not the one you see listed.
Could you
Oh, I
could
thought-
you also do a favor?
But it-
Because you said that the metal,
It happens to be in here.
the metal is what we get,
Tonnage.
we can get money.
We would get a revenue.
So will we keep, you'll keep that separate so that at the end of the year
Jim
we'll
would
know?
likely put that into a special revenue fund.
Yeah, just so we know, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it'll pay for itself, who knows? I mean, at least the overtime
It would,
maybe.
it'll definitely support some of the costs associated with it, and, any bit that we can get out
So
of
we
it.
tell our residents, bring all
I
your
mean,
metal.
you figure is that the metals used to be something that we had pickers going around and
Right.
taking out,
Yeah.
and you know, if it's something that the town can realize in a revenue stream out of, you know, the cost, help offset at least part of it, I think that's a victory, right, in itself.
Can't do this good as the pickers.
Well, that's right.
I don't wanna take you off presentation, but while we're here, is it possible to just run through quickly the other items under solid waste, since we're on solid waste? Because I'm a little confused as to which each one represents. Some of them are clear, leaf collection and disposal, 22,000, it's pretty specific, but.
Sure.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, so 5409 on page 126. Starting.
So, you know, obviously the overtime line,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
self-explanatory, that's to support, you know, the continuation of the electronics and mattress recycling events, as well as additional funding in there to support additional staff, for, anticipation of bulky waste in tandem with that. We zeroed out a line that had been carrying $50 that was underutilized or not utilized. Historically, that's kind of a carry forward for some time. Consulting services, those are in conjunction with a continuation of monitoring that's required for the closure of the landfill. And then if you go down, we really get into the other, which is the big lines for the household hazardous waste. So the transfer station license, it's a flat rate that's annual to the state of Connecticut. Household hazardous waste, that is the cost to do business with regional water authorities that has waste collection events annually. That's an estimate based on previous year's projections. Down to leaf collection and disposal, that's a cost that, again, that's to dispose of the leaves on an annual basis at farm in Woolpit that takes the leaves considerably less than
Renting the truck.
and renting the truck, right? And illegal dumping and disposal, again, that's an estimate for costs associated with Reservoir Road, we have dumping, Dickerman.
Where people just drop
Where
stuff.
people drop stuff, we do have to bring that material at that point to AJ's and we pay a fee to dispose of that annually. You do then get down into the bigger numbers, which are associated again with the actual curbside collection of solid waste and recycling. Those are reflective of the new contract numbers as negotiated with AJ.
Right, so the 1.1 million, that's the annual for the actual collection of both your curbside trash and your recycling. The item under that, just under $1 million, is tonnage. I think it's actually about 900,000, close to that. That's what we're carrying, I think, that $50,000 number. We're gonna just confirm that. The 50,000 that we talked about for the tonnage associated with disposing of bulky, if we did that at the town garage. But that's the tipping fee, so to speak, as we get charged, we have a contract for the per ton rate to dispose of it in Waterbury.
Yep, and you go down to the new homes fees, and that's in anticipation of new homes coming online, which add into the annual cost. Condominiums, dumpsters, solid waste and recycling, those are charged at a rate similar to what you would if you had a business get a dumpster for, because it is for the dumpster itself in anticipation of the contribution
That's
based
in
on
the
that.
AJ contract.
That's in the contract.
No weight involved in that?
No, that's just flat
That's
rate.
the dumpster rate.
Could you explain that again? So that is,
Condos.
So that's condominiums that don't have individual dumpster or individual receptacles, those have dumpsters, and there's several of the complexes that have.
so AJ charges to pick those up
Correct.
and then charges, and he gets paid to drop them off?
No, that's all inclusive of the dumpsters themselves and then the disposal of any and all of the material that's accumulated.
Just condominiums, then, so residential rental units,
Correct.
Residential rental units, over 5 units, I believe. I forget the number of units, but there's a trigger for so many residential units, they become categorized as a business, and therefore they're not privy to collection underneath the town's contract.
so when AJ gets paid to pick those up, what
Those
happens to
are,
the,
anything over the trigger number,
That's all it
yes,
that's something that.
where does he dump those?
So anything outside of the town contract, I don't know what he does.
So he doesn't dump those in the town contracts?
No,
Not under our contract.
no.
He takes it.
And you know the difference in, and we all know the difference in condominiums and rental apartment units. And that's, okay.
And the town buildings, in a similar fashion to the condominiums, is based on the cost for the dumpster, similar to any other commercial application. Those are charged as a rate specified in the contract. And the recycling fee, that's the town's contribution. Previously, that was a fixed rate with a maximum of $35 a ton by contract. The year one of the new contract that we're working on with AJ anticipates a year one contribution for the town of 50%. And at the current rate, that's $45 a ton. So in year one, you realize a $10 a ton increase over where we were last year. So that's a pretty substantial contributor to the increase on these lines. And then the additional trash and recycling containers, those are what we use for rolling stock for new residential and for when people want additional cans or we have damaged or cans in need of replacement.
So we don't see how, where the increase, the $200,000, $193,000 increase came from. Is it specific here?
We can, yeah, it's-
It is
Is it across
pretty
the board?
specific. Most of that is in relation to the lines that are noted on this slide. Some other nominal increases in the consultant lines, those are pretty static. Actually, those are static from last year, I apologize, a little bit. They're 31.5 to 32.9. Otherwise, the majority of that is broken down into the major lines here.
So all
The
these went up
curbside
in-
collection,
Yeah.
the $945 for the solid waste, the condominiums fees. New homes stayed relatively flat, as did the additional trash cans. But again, the bulk of it is in relation to the fees for the tonnage, which is going from $106.90 a ton to $111.20. Another, it's a 4% increase, which interpolates to, again, a considerable increase on the year.
So the two numbers, the 1.13 and the 945, make up the home collections, that's over $2 million.
Correct.
That's just the home collections,
Correct.
all that is there. And the 124 for condominiums is not in the home collection, so what, we have about 5-6% of the town are condominiums, is that what that means?
That's
some-
condominiums that have,
Some condos
Yeah.
do, it depends on the style of condo. Some condos do have real regular dumpsters.
Like
If
a
AJ
Courier
can get
Woods.
his truck down, right, Courier Woods might be an example. If a side loading truck can get into the complex or road, then they would have toters. But if it's maybe a more dense condominium or a back area where there's just a dumpster, a couple of dumpsters, a recycling dumpster and a trash dumpster, those are done with,
Front
the front loading dumpster trucks.
Thank you.
So the increase is almost entirely the AJ contract?
correct.
It's almost all,
Well,
yeah.
it's a- yeah,
it
the
is
AJ
all-
contract
Because
is-
the contract also includes, remember, there were the town buildings, or the school buildings also that you don't see in this one.
Yeah.
Some of those numbers, through that negotiation, we had, I think it was a 5% in the first year, and then 3% the other years.
Thereafter.
Because they were trying to true up to his actual costs. And then we had, as Dan just said, 4% up on the tipping fee contract.
And that's outside of the AJ contract.
Right, and then similar on the others. So those are the largest, but the recycling one has a percentage basis. And we can get you last year and this year for each of those items, so you can just see the increase. The recycling will be your largest percent increase, because that, again, as Dan said, that's something like a 20 or 25% increase. Roughly $30 to about
Sorry, Gene.
Yeah, no worries. Since this is such a high dollar amount, I know we discussed it when we talked about the contract, but I was wondering if you could just reiterate it for those who might have missed that meeting and are watching now. The analysis that you did with respect to the fact that having the town collect the curbside garbage is a cost savings to
Sure.
the taxpayer
Yep.
versus personal contracting.
Right, I can do that. Yeah, we haven't actually had public conversations on it. That was an executive session discussion, but we will be having that soon for when we're ready to approve the contract. So it's a good time to introduce the topic, I think, or reintroduce it, because it's a recurring theme every year. And we had estimated that if you take that curbside number, both the collection and the disposal unit, and you add them together, and you get that roughly over $2.2 million, and you divide it by the number of homes and units, condo units and homes being serviced. We came up with, I think it was around $220 per year, that is costing the average, therefore residential taxpayer, right? If you compare that to communities like Wallingford, like Simsbury, like Southbury, places that don't offer municipal curbside collection, typically you'll see rates around $400 to $450 a year. So it is a savings on average for the taxpayer, again, on average, and paid through your mill rate, on average from 220 to about 4, so call it about 50% on average. The only caveat I would say is that the higher your tax bill is, right, from a math standpoint, technically the same percentage applies of the mill that is going to collection. So arguably, if you have a higher tax bill, you're paying a little higher percentage share for that service. Conversely, if you're in a home that is lower than average valued, or let's say at the 25% level, that 220 is really $130 that you're technically contributing towards the town's collective collection of trash and recycling. If that makes sense. So, on average, though, I think the fair number is 220 versus about 440 or so. So I would say about half of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, if, what's your experience with the monthly collections? You know, do we get 10 cars, do we get 100 cars?
You know, we haven't really taken the numbers on the cars, but the dump body, that if you look at the pictures here, those are pictures of, you know, the tractor trailer truck body and the storage container that's there for electronics. They're typically close to full on a monthly basis, both of them having to get emptied in between. So it's something we could certainly start to track is the volume of cars, but the volume of material that we're getting is pretty substantial.
And it's consistent,
It's pretty,
there's
yeah,
no
I
like,
mean, we have a little bit
you
of
know,
down month where.
December, you know,
Yeah.
nobody shows up in
No,
December.
you know, it's.
We canceled one.
We had February, we didn't
Just the
have,
weather
we
didn't
were thinking about, you know, January as being that month, but because of the holiday, coming off the holiday, we figured we'd probably see an influx, and, you know, it was still consistent with the previous months. Again, I would have expected a little bit of a curve down, but,
Yeah.
it's been relatively consistent.
Okay, thanks.
On solid waste.
Go back to the regularly scheduled program.
Regular schedule. Yeah, we jumped right back into it, jump into public property. Again, similarly to Public Works, you know, I represent the previous year appropriation.
So this one, just as a, sorry Dan, but just as a reminder, public property is in a whole different section of the budget. Just to keep you on your toes. So if you go to page roughly 48, wait, it's early.
Yeah.
So under administration and finance, because a lot of the, you know, these lines are not specific to the public works function, but really a component of all departmental, cross-departmental functions. So if you go to, I think really starting on page 46, 47, when it comes to staffing, you'll see there are the two building maintainers, but other than that, it's largely a utilities and supplies driven budget. I'll turn it back.
And, you know, to that point, we have the increases and reductions offered, again, as a representation prior to seeing the net change. This line specifically, we've remained relatively flat, offering a reduction under the equipment line. And then the major increase in this line is the utilities. That line, if you look at the budget book, you'll see increases relative to approximately 15%, pretty much across the board on all the utilities. You know, the Eversource specifically on both the gas and the electric side presented Pura with a proposal for what would be associated with a 25% increase proposed for the delivery side. Jim and I talked to our consultant for utilities, And, you know, they said to absolutely anticipate a 10% increase, but hedge a little bit higher than that as a safety net in the projections for the following year. There hasn't been any decision yet as to where that's exactly gonna land, but that is where we come in with the increase to that line of $77,466.
Does the town have to pay the public benefits fee like the rest of us do?
I'm
I'm
not
just
sure.
curious to see, and I'd like to know how much it is,
That's
if
a
you do.
good question. I don't know that offhand.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we can find out.
Yeah, I'd like to find that
I would
out.
guess so, 'cause most of it's Millstone, so.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, so I would
I'm curious to
assume.
find out how much of that increase,
I think it is in there.
Yeah,
The municipalities are paying.
yeah.
I mean, I know we're, except from the sales tax and some of those things, but I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, the electric bills themselves look identical to the ones we pay ourselves.
Yeah.
So
I'd like, if you could just get us how much it has been and what you're expecting.
And then, you know, again, the other increases to that line are contractual services. You're looking at $3,000. We did have an increase of $15,000 to that line, but we offset that with $11,500 in an effort to reduce the financial impacts in this year. In total, we had $106,000 in increases with 19,811 in reductions for a total of 86,217. Again, the majority of that being underneath that utilities line.
And you said that could be 10%, you 15% you're concerned,
Yeah, I mean, that number, I mean, if you brought it down to 10%, you know, you could shave something out of that. But again, to hedge on the bet, I'd be safer to bet on the high side for that one. And that's, you know, for the operating budget side, you know, that's the high level as to where we were last year, the increases, the reductions we were able to offset some of those increases with. And, you know, if anybody wants to jump into the budget book to look at anything more closely, we'd certainly take that opportunity.
And on electricity, maybe just, or maybe it's Jim, but how, on the supply side, how far out are we contracted?
Supply side, we're contracted out through the end of this year, and I believe
I
we're
think it's
actually,
calendar year.
yeah, so we
it's about
actually,
6 months of the proposed budget. So
Correct,
there's
yeah.
an uncertain, I think we talked about that a little bit at the last workshop.
Right.
But
we also recently asked the consultant to dive into the natural gas side because there were some indications that we had that lended the opportunity that Eversource has always been favorable because, for the gas supply side because they own the lion's share of the volume in the gas supply. And there were some indications that it might be a slide in the other direction, and they were actually looking into that. We should have some information further on the way that bid that was put out looks, whether or not it's gonna be a benefit for us to consider.
Dan, the Board of Ed is on a different cycle than us with any of that, electricity or?
Well, obviously, the gas side has always been based on market rate through Eversource.
Yeah.
The electric, I think, is on a bit of a different cycle. But we did look at accumulating the town side and Board of Ed side in the last bid that we did for that, and it didn't prove any favor.
Didn't help us.
Yeah.
and can you, the RFP that we have out right now, I guess, when are we looking?
So that's put out through the consultant, and
Yeah.
that's not, you know, a town RFP. What she does is she puts out a bid to suppliers, and then she provides us the results back. I think she said it was last week.
Yeah,
maybe it was
sorry,
this
are you
week.
talking about the energy
I'm actually
performance?
talking
Oh,
about
the
the
energy
ESCOs,
performance.
yeah, I'm
Oh.
actually talking about, yeah, the ESCO, yeah. So, like, just thinking about how that's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
affect us next year in terms of the ESCOs.
So a little more, I guess I would take a stab at it, a little more on the capital side. It's an opportunity to remove some of the upcoming capital expenditures that you'll see in the capital budget. Largely on the school side, a lot of those projects that were deemed eligible and managed, I believe, were on the school side. But what you would see is a line to pay that. So theoretically, right, you'll be saving the electricity and the cost, but you will see a fee similar to on page 48, very bottom of page 48, rentals and leases.
That's-
Part of that $165, and it really should be spiked out, but I'm not sure why we don't, but we should. It says performance contract lease agreement. that's where we're still paying back Amoresco for
For
the
the
last
first one, yeah.
energy performance guide. So there is a, you know, a
So we'll
baseline
have
fee that
reductions
we
in
pay.
some of the upper lines for the cost of utilities, but we'll have
And
an
it should-
increase to that lease line and
And again,
depends
theoretically,
on the
the break
program
even,
that's
and
adopted, if there is one.
right, utilities have come down, but you have that base fee, but then you've also financed those capital projects.
Right.
So that might be a new addition. Again, as a budget line item next year, you'll see where that's neutralized, a new fee there, but then should see associated reductions next year.
Right.
And I do have just a few slides for the capital, picture, a couple of the things that we've been involved in the last year. And then, you know, our capital budget, public properties, you know, much to the respect of the current situation with the budget. We limited our requests in this year, moving things out to the right. We do have money in for the design of the senior center parking lot, which will include evaluation of the structure of the retaining wall and improvements to the configuration and layout to optimize accessible parking stalls, which are in demand at the facility and somewhat lacking in the number. So we're looking at 225. The year two line, you know, the aggregate there is considerable. In the next year, the plan would be to evaluate all of those projects and prioritize what might be a more palatable year one for next year's budget. Those are all projects that were on the budget from last year and for year one and year two.
So the municipal animal control facility upgrades, I thought we were talking about an alternative to that. Is that the right number there or that?
That is the alternative.
That's still the number that, right, that's the
That's
number we
the
took the last
alternative
meeting.
number?
Correct,
That is the-
which is considerably lower than the anticipation previously. And that's based on some design work that was done in response to the requirements from
The consent
the
order.
consent order. We did have somebody come in and evaluate it. Previous anticipations were that the facility was going to be costly to retrofit through some evaluation of the 2029 standards that are going to be out and some reconfiguration to the current facility. We're able to actually, at this time, initial indications from the state ACO is that the configuration that we were able to come up with will meet the requirements at substantially less cost than we previously anticipated, which included everything from a full design to potential at looking at another location and creating another facility.
So where does that stand now? We're still waiting for,
We're finalizing the final proposals for the construction. We've got proposals from a couple different contractors, and then once we have those, the plans along with the proposals are sent to the ACO, the state ACO, for review and approval.
so you're getting construction bids before you send them up for approval?
Correct.
So that number will be a
Yeah,
good
the
number.
vendors that we're using and the dollar denominations, the vendors for some of the work are on state bid, they're more higher dollar values or for the fencing on both inside and outside. Vendors that we've received pricing from are on state contract, and then we have some concrete work and some other minor improvements that are going to be done under that building. But their requirement was that we sent them proposals for
For
the
actual
work that they, yeah.
Not just the,
And once we have that final design, we'll circulate that off to the council.
and then the parking lot at the senior center, I go there occasionally, I never pay attention. The walls The walls
The
faded.
wall between
The
the
two
senior
parking-
center and the lower parking lot, I had Merrick take a quick look at it.
I know.
And, you know, the modular block wall, I mean, there's a railing at the top has hit several times, which caused some displacement
I've
on the
never
top
hit
of
it.
the
I've hit
wall.
many.
No, so friend did it. No, but to any effect is the full evaluation prior to building a new parking lot on top of it is the appropriate step forward.
Now, 2 year, and second year, we talked about this the other day, and the second year, we really only focus on the first year, but the second year has an impact on us in other ways. Are we gonna focus on whether we wanna keep $2.5 million in the second year, or let that go tonight? I'm just asking.
Yeah, it's really up to the council, again, respectful of the time, there's less pressure from a timing standpoint on the capital budget. So my hunch is with how far we need to get the operating budget, moved in a different direction from where it is now, that we'll probably spend more of our focus over the next
That's fine. with me.
couple
I
weeks
just-
and
I
days
just
on that. But it's a great point, I was about to make the same one, that number is not gonna be, that number we talked about last week at the, at our last workshop was the evening after the morning of our ratings call, where I think I shared with the council that the number of projects that we had, the anticipated associated debt that we'd be taking on if we really did years 2 through 5, was something that was raised and was a concern. I am pleased to report on that topic that although it's only one of 2, we did receive word that we'll be receiving our AAA bond rating later this afternoon.
Awesome.
Officially released, the press release about an hour
For
or 2 ago.
Fitch.
For Fitch, and we're waiting on S&P, which is a little harder one to attain, but of the 2, that's great that we have at least one. But
By
a
the
stable
end-
outlook, which is,
By the end of the week?
they go to committee on Thursday.
Okay.
So that was good news, but again, so in a stable outlook, which I was very happy about, not a concerning outlook, but in their
We're
narrative.
halfway
Which
there.
I will, like I did last year, I'll circulate that narrative, it's a great read, 7 or 8 pages, but there's a lot of good information that really shows a good snapshot of the town and also all the positives, which there's a lot, and some concerns they had around this topic. So I do think we need to take a close look, really prioritize, to what Dan said,
Yep.
try to make the most realistic year 1 through 5 capital budget we can. It will serve us really well, not just for realistic planning, but also for future bond issuances, when we're back doing this in just under 12 months.
I think more than halfway, because that brings us to 70 million to date for the schools.
Just for
out
the
of
schools that we've issued.
92, but hopefully that number will come down a little bit.
And on that topic, the rate, we'll officially know our rate, we have our actual sale on April 2nd, which is next Wednesday. So we'll be emailing the council.
That's another
Get
good day
some
then.
budget savings out of that, I hope.
So as part of our wrapping up capital this year, we should make it a priority to look at that 2 through 5. Clean it up.
I haven't paid as much attention in the past.
In the past couple of years, we've really focused on year 1,
Right.
and we've called those placeholder years, and I think it's really, as we've taken on the school debt, this is a good year to really
Right.
go through and start to cross some things out.
I sent out the kind of the new budget workshop schedule, and one of the nights is capital, not only looking back, because I want to do cleanup as well, but looking forward. So even if you didn't have exact, Dan, if we could, there's 10 projects there. If you did 3, 4, and 3 and divided them, in the out years that
Right.
way or something.
And those.
Just kind of by general priority, just to give us a sense of,
Yeah, and those add into, as you spread those out, obviously there are projects
Yeah.
in years 3,
Yeah.
4, and 5, so, you'll be pushing, you'll obviously be pushing things out, because we're minimalizing this year, right? We're gonna be pushing out past 5 into potentially 6 and 7 as we look to make this more realistic. Obviously there's some projects here that are already in the pipe, have been assigned and designed to PVC, which become, immediate priority over others, just because once you're into the design phase, you don't wanna let things sit on the shelf too
Yeah.
long. Once they get through design, they'll have,
Absolutely.
adequate budget numbers, and again, we won't wanna really sit on those unless it's something that's not a priority for the community.
See that salt sheds back too.
That's for the design side, that's, yeah, the design side.
Price went down.
That's just the price.
Just
The
design now.
price went down.
Actually,
Oh,
that's,
oh,
no, that's
I thought
the
it was-
wash
I
bay
thought it
is
was
the
750
80,000, and then the salt shed is the 650, and again,
That
that
was-
was,
that was
better
that
pricing.
was the place, so I think last year's,
750.
last year's
Was it
number was
750?
larger,
Was
I
it?
think that was something, we broke out the design for year one, and then that drops this number down. So still, that placeholder, we're looking into concepts for design on that one right now, so.
I just remember that's expensive shit.
It certainly
Yeah.
is, the one that's
We should call
obviously.
it something other than a shed.
Yeah, it's a sizable building that's
Yeah,
there, the
salt
idea would be
storage
the idea would be to increase the size and, size and capacity. So, when we end up in situations like we experienced this year across the state, there were communities that, ran out of salt. And, we have done our best to keep the shed full at the end of seasons in order to both get the most favorable rates off peak and keep the shed full for when there is shortages. We're pretty diligent at keeping it as full as possible. Having that extra capacity give us a little bit more breathing room when we get concerned that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into staff stuff just because I don't want to feel like we're picking on them. I know as we go through some deliberations, Sean may have, once we come up with a number, Sean may have some suggestions, so we may want to put off any sort of staff discussion for later. One question I do have though is about, did we hire a maintainer last year in this fiscal budget?
Correct.
But that person didn't start until January, is that right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
grounds
So
was-
that's the
It's a
reason
ground
you
position?
see,
Correct.
yep, yeah,
It was a half-year position.
if you go
Grounds,
to,
it was
if you go to
That was
page,
maintained.
It was a grounds maintainer
Parks.
position.
Oh,
So
That
that
was-
ended up being an internal transfer that ended up turning into a public works maintainer being hired from the outside.
so if you go to page 128, just to kind of see that bear out, when you see the groundskeeper PW3s at the top of page 128, you'll notice, I know it's a little hard to gray there, but that it looks like a substantial increase because it says 12% increase, 47,976. That is exactly what you were saying, Jim, that is
A half
a
year
position that we only funded 50% of last year, had an authorization to hire January 1st, did, and then that's why you see what looks like a larger increase, that's just because we now have that person on, and so for all of next fiscal year, we're paying the full salary.
so we don't really have we don't have a season yet to sort of see the impact of that hire.
Well, we're seeing,
Or are we already seeing?
we already are in that, I mean, really, I was at Bartlett South today, actually watching parts of the band shell kids over, which was very exciting, great photos of mine. It's in parts, it's a Lego project right now, but you saw the guys out there getting the bathroom ready to be online, they have all of that substantial additional acreage to now care for. That was a large driver of adding this position, but also just the fact that we have 5 other park facilities plus grounds, town buildings, and they do it all with just that staffing you see there on the page.
Yeah. Do we anticipate needing to do as much seasonal help this summer?
It's always, the seasonal help kind of gets us through the peak season. I mean, we're bringing on the summer help, they're able to actually keep up. We would be behind daily, and we wouldn't be able to keep up with both the demand for services. I would tell you that, like this year specifically, our crews starting off the season are focusing on Diamond 4 at McNamara. Instead of hiring a contractor to come out, we're diving in and we're actually changing the configuration of that field ourselves to try to offset what would have been the substantial cost to the town to have a third party come in. So having that staff come on and augment the relatively small number of staff that we have annually is critical to maintaining the fields and the facilities in the condition that's expected.
I mean, everything looks great throughout town, every time I'm anywhere in the park, there's something.
Yeah, you may have seen just as you came into this facility, of course, you have Quinnipiac Park. Just as a note, I don't want to add anything, but we rested a few fields there this year. And so when you see, I know it'll be dark when we leave, unfortunately, but you have a chance, you'll see Orient, I guess is one of the farthest
So
north.
one closest to this building.
Yeah, closest to this building,
So
it was
we
rested
did a lot of work on it last year
and a whole lot of.
we're trying to get into, and we've sent out a memo to John and to the user groups, is we're we're gonna be rotating the fields instead of having all fields in play all the time. There's a substantial, obvious investment made by the town into maintaining these fields. And, you know, I identified, you know, some fault in the way that it's been handled in the past, is there wasn't ever any time for these fields to rest. Specifically this field that we've rested in the fall, we're allowing some extra time into the spring for the field to establish its dormant seed, which is actually what establishes the long-term field for play, where some of the quicker growing seed holds a canopy for the stronger seed to develop underneath and then take place. We've unfortunately never had that opportunity, so we've implemented a program where we're gonna leave this field offline into the spring, allow the dormant seed to take place, and then enter into field rotation over the next probably year and a half to bring the fields up to a better condition, pretty much at static cost, but just by controlling the use of the fields more. And then we'll implement an annual program with, you know, 2 to 3 week rest periods to allow the grass to rebound from regular use. That in the long term should equate to a reduction in the overall demand for some of the seed and fertilizer that does end up contributing to a good part of that ground's budget.
And then this might be something for Dan Golick as well, but have we ever done an analysis about how much we rent out these fields for versus how much it costs us to take care of? I'm curious to see if we are actually getting enough money for the use of these fields versus what it's costing us to maintain them. We've never done anything like that?
We have,
No,
I mean,
We're not.
The
We're not.
analysis is not close.
Not even
because-
close, so
Yeah.
that's
because
something
those
that
leagues
might
aren't
be
paying
good.
any fees.
There's considerable delta that could be a topic for the council to consider. I looked at it and had Ray Harris look at it in depth, comparing our costs and to other communities of similar size. Other communities aren't only recuperating the costs of upkeep and maintenance. There's communities that are actually funding replacement, they're funding expansion of other facilities through the revenue stream that's generated. And these communities, again, are similar size and stature as Cheshire. And it's
You mean from local leagues, from like the rec leagues?
across the board, from both local rec leagues and from larger groups that come in and use the facilities for the outside. Differing fee schedules for, you know, the local groups versus the larger groups, similar to what we have now, just a little bit more realistic in what, you know, you would consider to cover the cost at the very least. You know, the stadium lighting that went in, for instance, at Bartland Park, that has a life expectancy. And if you were, you know, realizing a break-even cost, that's wonderful. But if you were able to realize a cost to create a fund balance that could replace those at the life, you know, then life, that would be a savings that would be able to shared by the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a dilemma, I know, for many councils past. You know, I think especially with local leagues, and I think all of our fees are on the little bit lower side when we compare to other communities, but, you know, we are fully cognizant that you have many already taxpayers paying in those leagues, and I think that's been one of the arguments certainly against, although when we have special additional requests or services, I think the example of the resting fields, not to kind of pick on Quinnipiac here, but, you know, if you see that, it's $162,000 that we're spending on fertilizer at seed. And no, just across the
that's
board,
it.
but
Yeah.
I'm picking out only because it in part, when you aren't resting fields, you get a lot of turf damage, you get repair requests, you get complaints about playability. And sometimes, and we've had to do this also with McNamara 3 or 4 years ago, we've had to invest a lot more of the town's taxpayer funds into improving at the request of the leagues. And I think kind of what Dan is speaking to, and John Golick has talked about this before, is in a perfect world, some of those leagues I think are willing to pay a little more if they know it's going, not into maybe the general fund, just some giant revenue piece, but if you had a special, this is a perfect example when you might consider a special revenue fund to say, look, we're willing to pay a little extra. The leagues used to do this, it just wasn't really through the books from what we could tell back before. So they would buy things like a turf, they'd buy a field liner, or they would go buy speedy dries or try to just use it themselves and donate it. And that's fallen off over the years. But also because really the best way to account for that is really with a formal acceptance of that as either a gift or donation or funds, right? Which really how you should do it. So if we had took a good look at those fees, there's some adjustments we could make. It might allow us to offset a little bit of some of these costs, or just start to build a special revenue fund where, we're buying some of our fertilizer, some of our seed, specifically from funds coming from the leagues, using it, sometimes heavily using some of those funds. Again, I think it's something that we're looking for any possible revenue stream that can help. This is certainly a year that we need to do that. And I think we can follow this more, but as Dan said, his office took a look at that analysis that you're talking about.
Yeah, like, only, I had a constituent contact me, they're paying a lot of money to have their kids in these leagues, and then they go online and look at the tax returns and see the assets that these leagues have, and they're saying, gee, why, we're paying so much, but now, is the town getting enough money to cover the cost of these? And the answer is no. So I think we're gonna need to really look at that, because, I'm sure they're just gonna pass it on to their players, but, when you look at I looked at some of the tax returns on some of these leagues, and they have some pretty high assets that they could probably afford to give a little bit more for field rental.
Yeah, this has been brought up on Parks and Rec
Yeah.
repeatedly, almost every meeting,
Yeah.
and so I know that they've been looking, there's this, our parks ought to be a public good. I've honestly not necessarily supported the fees at Mixville, and I feel like our public parks are a public good, and this is something that our taxpayers pay for, to Sean's point, right, that people should expect, and so to have to pay to go to a park that's in your community, I find problematic, or another, right? I know even going down to the coastal areas and having to, not even being able to go to Branford's beaches, right? I think that's a problem in a state like ours. So I think there is this idea that we should see our parks as a public good. At the same time, I know that they've looked at leagues outside of town. So if we were to host leagues outside of town, or even tournaments outside of town, should they be paying? And so they've been reviewing Parks and Rec for the past year or so, looking at different schedules in terms of if we were to charge leagues outside of town. But then we're also encountering the fact that we have a shortage of fields.
Limited to
And
fields.
so do we even want to be inviting other teams from out of town to be coming, even though we could make revenue from those teams, and there's less resistance to that? And with the schools, I know that I was asked to bring this up, with the closure of Chapman and with the closure of Darcy, there'll be some fields lost there, and so there's concern already on Parks and Rec about losing those fields as well. And I know many of you have already been at Parks and Rec and some of those field organizing meetings with different teams.
Well, because I know that even with the turf field at the high school, that was a concern of the replacement, and we were always told they're gonna have a separate fund to put in money into that, and we're, I think, 11 years, 12 years into it, and I don't even think they have $50,000 in that fund. It's not, and guess who's gonna have to replace that? It's gonna hit the town, and it's probably gonna hit it within the next 5 years or so, I think, because it's getting old, so that's a concern of mine.
I'm surprised we haven't seen it yet, to tell you the truth. At the high school.
It's in good shape right now, from what I've told,
They tested everything.
they've taken care of it, but,
It's old.
And when was that built?
I think like 12 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Over 10.
Oh,
Any questions on the public properties?
No.
Do have Public Works, year one, I have one slide following this. Year two, there are 3 projects, sidewalk maintenance program, sidewalk extension program, and streetlight installation pole replacement, which is funded every handful of years to assist in replacing aged and deteriorated poles and installing new lights as they become required.
How much is one pole?
Pole itself, chip property.
Outside of Frontier.
So
$3,000.
it's about $3,000 for a pole, an arm, and the fixture. There's considerations there that drive the price up pretty high. If there's overhead wires, it's pretty close to $3,000, with the exception of the Eversource coming out and connecting. If there's underground electric, the recent cost we had was $33 a foot for the conduit installed underground that's necessary. And if it's a short run, it's not a big deal, but there's times where, you're looking at a couple hundred feet before you hit either a handhold or a transformer that could be tied into. So that price can get up to $10,000.
So this is about 10 to 12 poles replacement, right?
Well,
Roughly?
I think we did, we were ordering, we've done it in the past as soon as we took the program on. And I think that we were ordering a load of poles, we might not install all of them, but we received a preferential price when we ordered a full truckload. So we would order, I think, a load of 25 or 26, and have installed them as we needed.
Just to add to that real quick, we do have a new pole going up on Lancaster, and I think we're north of 15,000 on that one. Wow.
$50,000?
15,000.
I was gonna say.
Not 50. I would have said no. But, yeah, just to give you
But
an
yeah,
idea.
it's a consideration.
Just one? Just one.
Well, we heard last night, they had to replace the pole, was it 70,000 for, it was Frontier, charged them over by, with a new development.
Oh.
And then the final slide here is our vehicles and equipment. Any of the lines that are crossed out in gray or lines proposed in budget by the Department of Public Works and removed by Sean, and trying to keep again the budget low. Happy to take what we can get here. Again, supported in the budget is the non-dump trucks public works line, there's a road saw, and a manhole coring attachment for a skid steer. Self-explanatory, the road saw is used when we're replacing catch basins and doing patchwork. We use it to cut the road. The more equipment we have now is aged and becoming difficult to keep online. Manhole coring attachment for a skid steer would be a new piece of equipment to our arsenal, used to core around the manholes and assist with replacing them so that we're not square cutting around them. You end up with a better finish. And this is something that we're having to do more frequently at this point. And instead of replacing the manholes before paving, it lends us the opportunity to replace them after paving and just pave over top of the manholes. And then we're able to actually set the manhole to the elevation of the road instead of the road being set to the elevation of the manhole, which you end up with a better finish and transition for the motoring public and biking public.
We just avoid those.
Yeah. On that last one, Dan, with regard to the turf field groomer, is that shared with Board of Ed? So is that used for the high school field as well as
That
ours?
would be something we could certainly,
We don't have one now?
we do not, that would be a new piece of equipment.
But they have to, correct? The Board of
I
Ed
do
must have
not-
one.
I don't know if they have that equipment. I could certainly check with them, I'm
Yeah.
not aware of them
Rent
having
it?
one.
No.
Okay.
They wouldn't rent it.
Where is that?
The last item in the green there, the turf field reclaimer, it distributes that, the rubber
Yeah, so
infill.
we have a piece of equipment that's a tow behind. That attachment is used actually to pick up trash and debris that's left behind. It doesn't
Oh, okay.
redistribute the material.
Oh, it doesn't?
No,
it's
the
not
one
a
that we
groomer
have,
then.
well, the one that we
The
have.
turf field came with one.
Right.
The one
That's
he's
a-
describing picks
That's
up.
like a brush, that's like a
It brushes,
lawn
it
brush.
smooths a little
Yeah.
bit, it mostly cleans
Okay.
up debris.
This is a more intrusive piece of equipment that would actually move the material
Should be.
around. Over time, it gets pushed to the edges, and this would be something that would move it back to where it needs to be and
This is
redistribute.
recommended for longevity in the field.
This is needed for maintenance of the field,
Where would
otherwise
that
we
be
would have to
stored?
contract out. We would likely store that in the maintenance garage on the site.
There's room?
We would keep it in the larger, old bathroom, next to old bathrooms.
So what have they been doing at the high school?
I can't speak to that, I don't know.
We should
if they-
definitely coordinate, but.
Yeah, we-
We'll talk
Yeah,
to
what if you
that's- yeah.
contracted, what if, sounds like a once a year, I don't know.
It's more than once a year, and ideally it would
it's
be a
more
handful of
than
times a year. I could certainly get some pricing for that.
I mean, I assume it would you know,
Again,
extend the life of the
there's a
field. so-
limited amount of contractors that do that work, so I mean, it's not only the cost, but it's also getting the contractors to do the work.
And you're looking, I didn't hear you mention it, maybe I was just, my mind was so much, another 4x4, just a standard one that.
Pickup truck, yeah. Again, the wear and tear on the vehicles, we've been experiencing. We got a 2016 vehicle that we just had to put a bunch of money into because of rust and rot on the body. They're aging more quickly than we would like to see, but.
So how many 4x4s do you use? Those are for small jobs, I guess?
So the
parking lots?
4x4 trucks, they're used by the crew leaders on a
Cul-de-sacs,
daily basis. You know, they're used for cul-de-sac routes, for parking lots. We've been using them more for regular working weeks, trying to limit the amount that our crews are driving the larger dump trucks, which are technically they're assigned vehicles. And they're also used by the summer help for tending.
And so how many do you have then?
I'd have to get you that.
Do you have a hire one if you get one? or-
We actually have a couple that need to go out to auction at this point because they're not worth investing further into.
You do say you've done a wonderful job on the snow this year. It was a unique.
It wasn't
snow.
a,
But even so, I mean, it's greatly appreciated how you take care
the
of
guys
our,
do a great job and they're diligent.
Yeah, no, it's,
And just quickly on that, from a budget standpoint, it was a little bit of a worse year than average for us. We had those repeated, we had those ice storms. We had a lot of call-outs on a lot of events, and true to form, they seem to happen on MLK Day or any other, double time holidays, so it's added costs.
Worst possible time.
Yeah, love the Saturday night or the Sunday night call-outs, but we did budget, you'll see, I actually even trimmed back the budget about $10,000, just trying to find everything we could. We don't really budget for an average year, we budget for a little bit of a better than average year. Just keep that in mind, but the theory's always been if we really needed it, we're gonna do it, we'll come back to you for a request if it's a bad year. But it's sometimes when you don't necessarily have giant snow totals, but you can have those ice storms can be far more expensive, or even just salting the road, treating the road, so, but that's what we budget.
I noticed, I was just looking at, you reduced the salt line, but it's actually about, it's quite a bit more than it was just 2 years ago. Is that just inflation?
There's,
Well, that's an actual 2 years ago, so that was a
Yeah.
good winter.
That was a good one.
Right,
Yep.
that year's budget appropriation was probably, I don't have it in front of me, let's say it was another 50,000 or something higher than that. But that's actually the point I was just making, is that we really don't budget, we certainly don't budget all the way to the best year, because that would
Yeah.
be aggressive, but we probably budget to sort of that 25% range. I wish I could say we budget the average, even this year, again, like I said, we are over budget by probably,
we had $123,000 budgeted for overtime, and I think the last storm put us to 155.
yeah, so we're about 20-30 down, that's still pretty close.
That was,
but-
going from like, we were close to at budget, and we had one storm. It was a Sunday. And then the guys were there for a term, and it just, every time it snows on a weekend, I cringe.
Right.
That's all I have. If anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to.
Is that truck okay with all the wires that hanging out?
That was something, yeah, there was an issue, and again, this is another one of those things that you run into, there was an issue underneath the dashboard, and they had to pull the dashboard apart, and they had to sit and wait for a part that wasn't manufactured anymore, that they had to go dealership to dealership looking for old stock on. I mean, it's just as often that you have a vehicle that still works, but the parts they're not producing old stock for as long as they used to, and you end up with the vehicle sitting in the garage that looks like that for you.
Never want to open up.
No, that's what it looks like. If anybody was interested.
On grounds, 129, top of 129. The lighting, I know that the new pickleball lighting, we have timers where if there's people playing, they hit the timer and the lights come on and they can play. One of my pet peeves for years now has been driving by the youth center and,
Just lights
you
on
know,
and
in
nobody's at home.
November where it's 20 degrees and it's raining, well, maybe it's 40 degrees and it's raining.
Right.
And, you know, the lights are on.
And certainly look at, I mean, if there's a switch there that you turn on, you can look at an occupancy sensor that will, even if the switch is on, it's going to go off, something we can look at
Yeah.
and improve that.
It's
And that
same
cost,
in-
the increase there, you know, from, you know, 25 to 26, that is in part, to assume an increase for the use of Bartlett Park. And
Yeah.
even just in the short time that those were on last year, you know, the program that actually comes along with the Musco lighting, you're able to kind of see what it's anticipating based on the assumed rate that we're paying. And even in a short term last year, it was several $1,000s in costs associated with having those lights again on it at no cost to the user. Part of, again, the conversation around user fees associated, something specific to that. If there's an assigned value that somebody has and they have a schedule and they're on for 5 days a week for 3 hours, if day 2 ends up being a day they're not there, it's as simple as a telephone call that could save them money. If there's no skin in the game,
Yeah.
or for instance, from these user groups, there's no reason for them to call and tell us that they're not gonna be there, and it's a cost to the
And
taxpayers
then
to
we get
have those on.
complaints sometimes when the lights are on.
Right.
It's usually-
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
So
just a
it's
consideration, you know, and another, you know, opportunity to have the user groups accountable to a point for what they've asked for.
Yeah, and I know that's something that Galway has talked about too, because I know there are a lot of teams that reserve fields, but then don't use them. So
Yeah.
holding those teams accountable for actually being there when they say they're gonna be there.
Do we have time to come up with some sort of plan during this budget process to include that this year, or is it gonna be a longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could, I think what you'd probably do from this, you know, process standpoint would be, you know, come up with, I guess, the charge, right, separate in terms of, to maybe the Park and Rec Commission or something to say, we'd like you to generate, come up with fee changes that would generate X dollars. I mean, we would assume some comfortable number of revenue or however we'd like to do it in this budget. I don't think we have to have mapped out every fee, but between now and ideally July 1st, you challenge staff slash, let's say, Park and Rec Commission in this case, maybe to adopt a amended fee schedule that they believe, or staff has calculated, they believe will generate anticipated revenue or special revenue, if that's what we decided to do. So I think you just need to adopt sort of the concept and we could budget for it. And I think between now and, you'd want to put more details around it, for sure, but at least the principles involved, you want to make sure you've committed to it, and then we say, okay, well, we are gonna start charging maybe a small fee for those, all of those local 501c3 groups, those priority 2 groups, they're not charged any additional clear. So if there's even a small add-on fee, that's the decision, I'm not saying we do that, but we want to at least have said, this is what we would like to see you do.
So the
Evening
note-
use will be different than day use too.
Certainly,
I mean,
there could be, many towns charge a separate lighting.
Right, they have the base field fees in a lot of instances.
Remember, Bartlett was our first really ever lit, other than the one sort of baseball field, and sort of a little bit of Cheshire Park, when junior football used to use it. All the lights you see, when you do see them here at Quinnipiac, those are all rented by Cheshire Soccer Club. The town does not pay for those. There's no permanent lights here.
This is a dusk to dawn.
Right. I will say, and I'm sure they would like me to say, I've been approached a couple times by Cheshire Soccer Club asking that we put parking lot lights in here. Because they're renting lights and using the field later, when they get off the field, it's dark. And that's a very dark parking lot, and it can be, it's a funky, anyone that's in Cheshire Soccer Club knows, it's a
Yes.
funky angle, triangular, and there's kids going around, and it's a safety concern. But
It is.
it is a self-created safety concern because they're using the fields late into the
Yeah.
game. That being said, they have asked if we would support, I did not put anything in the budget for that, but that's just a request of lights. So it's just another example, but the turf field is our biggest, potential user of lights where you might want to consider a fee or something for those, to the point Dan makes, but at least they're not being used, or at least not offset or charged for when people are using them. If they just reserved them and not used them, they'll have the lights on.
There's another $1 million. Park and rec fees.
Wow.
Dan, I think you answered it with a couple of the statements that you gave to my earlier question, but I'm assuming that the irrigation system increase is a lot of Bartlett.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay,
That whole place is irrigated.
yeah, I know, it is. It does, it looks great, so.
Anyone have anything else for Dan? Good.
That's good.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna stand up.
Oh, thanks.
All right, so we're gonna do this a little bit differently
Thank you.
than how Dan presented. I have handouts for you. Since there's two of us in tandem here, it'd be a little tight to be over there, so I think.
We wanted more paper anyway.
Yes.
I miss it, now that we have the laptop, right?
Thank you.
All right, if you recall, last year, the engineering department was actually separated from the public works department. That was his first year, today's or this year's his second year in June, so.
You guys okay?
We're doing great.
Sorry.
Yeah, a little anxiety
Thank you.
once in a while, but that's all right. We cut each other off. The engineering department is broken up into three categories. It's the engineering division, the wastewater control department, and also the authority itself. Page 3 is just an outline you can, or an organizational chart that you can refer to at a later date. We won't get into that. But page 4, I just want to go over our budget review. Keep in mind this does not take into account insurance, retirement plans, salaries. I try to keep it simple just on the operating end of the spectrum. For engineering, what I did was I went into this going flat. I didn't have any increase. But Sean did find some areas where he did do some reduction. We did a 12%, roughly a 12% decrease in my department. You can see the numbers there. It's about a change of about $12,000 he reduced, but it does add up to about 12% in reduction, which is approximately 4.5% of the entire department, the engineering department. Skipping down to the WPCA, I also went flat. There's really no charges there. That's basically just pen and paper kind of deal, advertising for. It's really just a minor thing. That was flat. You can see that is actually less than 1% of the budget, so there's nothing there. The big one is really the water pollution control department itself. We do have an increase of $145,000. That's roughly 8.7% increase for that line item. But it is 95% of the entire engineering department budget. If you look at if you add up for the entire thing, we're only looking for a 7.6 increase. This increase is a need and not a want. I remember last year that was one of the topics was what's needed or what's wanted. What we're going to be going over is actually needs. There's no wants here. On page 5, it's just a breakdown of the two separate line items of the operating budget that this is being affected. The first one is 5203. It's labeled as water, that is mislabeled. It's actually equipment supplies. Now, this one's a little bit tough, but every year in the capital budget, we have a recurring request for in-kind equipment replacement. We've asked for in the past and throughout the years, $300,000 every year, and we received it for replacement of pump parts, any parts to do with the plant itself. Jim, I'm going to put you on a spot, Jim Jaska, but one of the things that we've had in the past discussion is that is actually a recurring expense that really shouldn't be part of the capital budget. It really is an operating expense. So this was the year that we actually brought that over into operating. We didn't ask for the full $300,000 that we've been asking for. We've actually only increased our operating by $115,000. That's almost a third of what we normally would be getting. But due to this year's issues with the budget, we had to do something, and this is where we want to keep it moving forward. The second part is that we have program materials and supplies. Basically, these are chemical costs that we have, and Dave can go into deeper if needed. But in the past years, we have been fully under budget in this item. And, you know, we can no longer be under budget. We have to actually get up to where we need to be. I do believe last year for the operating, we were over budget in our department for the water pollution control quite a bit. And this is one of the reasons why we I won't go into the next page. I just want to stick with operating at this point, and we can go into a quick review of capital. But those are the only two line items that were affected. Everything else is was flat, stagnant. Keep in mind, this is a utility for the town. We do have a self-producing revenue stream, which is the sewer capacity fee that is implemented every year, and you know, that's how we are funded as well.
And I'll just add, there's been some years where we've budgeted that capital in capital and turned around and used some of the money from this fund anyway to pay for it. So it's almost like we were just putting it in this budget to begin with.
So Mayor, you said 300 was in capital last year,
300 was capital last year.
and now you have 250 in operating this year, is that what you're saying?
We've increased our operating for that line item. We originally had
135, is that right?
Yeah, it was 135.
135, yes.
So an increase
So
of 115.
Your operating 135 included other items, not just pumps and.
Correct.
replacement,
It
things like
included
that.
vehicle O&M and miscellaneous operations and maintenance.
But it's
So you had
mostly-
a 150. And it's 115 versus 300, are you gonna be all right with that, with the pump stations and things, or is that? Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't expect a lot of.
We had a lot of
numbers?
catching up to do from when I first got here, so the bulk of the stuff that needs to be replaced immediately, that's why the numbers are a lot higher in the last
Okay.
2 years.
I mean, we would like to get more, but we understand
No,
what
no,
the
we
constraints that
appreciate-
we have this year, so we're trying to make it work.
Just wanna
I
make sure
think we have a good
understood.
balance here.
And we, right, and so in those out years, you will not see, in the capital budget, you won't see it high.
Okay.
I have a question. A couple of years ago, I took a tour of this place when a lot of things weren't working. And I know that there was a lot of money that had to be put into it to get things up to speed on everything. I mean, we had pumps that were, never worked from the day they were installed, and to other things that have been sitting idle and not working. How are we now? Are we up to date with basically everything, and everything seems to be functioning the way it's supposed to be?
Yes, when I first started, there was rotating drum thickeners, what they were called.
That's what I was, yeah.
Those were never operated since
There were
2015.
3 of them, right?
We have 2.
2, yeah.
Yep, part of that in-kind replacement money did go towards getting those up and running. They have been up and running for the past year and a half. So there really isn't anything that's laying stagnant right now. Everything's running the way it's supposed to, and this money that we're asking for is to keep it that way.
I have to say that you've done a heck of a job. I mean, I appreciate when you came in, it was a mess, and I wanna say that to you publicly, because I think what you have done is brought us back up to speed where we need to be, and now, you know, we can continue if we continue along the maintenance plan that we have, we should be fine. I mean,
Just to clarify, we're not where we really should be. There's still room for improvements. We do have stuff that is on the capital, like the denitrification, belt press replacements. There are stuff that still needs to be upgraded, but that just happens over time. Things wear out, and it's always gonna be a constant moving part.
well, that's what we expect. I mean, it says, put a lot of money into this plant, and if we don't take care of it, then we've wasted all this money. And yeah, it costs money to take care of expensive plants, but I mean, it's better than not spending the money and letting it fall apart, because then you may never be able to catch up to it, so.
And I agree, Dave's done a terrific job,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.
But I think it's your year to get on the cover of a magazine. So we expect.
Challenge accepted.
So Mayor, there's two items I noticed that are a little higher as far as the budget book goes.
In water treatment or?
In water pollution control fund.
Right, so the second one is what's called program materials, and that's basically the chemicals. That's the one you're looking at?
54 is construction, so I'm just looking at where it was 2 years ago, 25,000, so now we're looking at 75,000. It's pump station, wet wells, collection system, maintenance,
Is that the one time?
miscellaneous construction costs, 50,000.
What line item?
What page are you on?
I'm sorry,
Page 139.
139,
Yeah,
54,
139, second one down.
Mayor, was that for the, modifying of the, slush line?
That was part of it.
Is that a one-time thing you guys did, is that what you're saying?
I believe so, yeah.
That was the conversion of the conveyor belts.
Yeah, and that's already been completed.
Okay. It's already been completed, so it's,
So the construction cost, you don't need the 50,000 there?
No, that was done last year.
For that particular job, I believe the reason we kept it in there was that there is still ongoing construction always happening in the plant. There's always things that need to be done. Consultants, like HVAC scenario, which I'm gonna talk about in the capital section, there are expenses for having that type of stuff done. Can we reduce that? Sure. We can definitely, if you wanna drop that by half, I would, instead of 50,000, have 25,000, but we should have something in there for the incidentals.
yeah, I just caught my eye because the difference between the 2 years was significant, but it sounds like it's a project that was done. And one other item is just lower down the page, 5409, where it's, 2 years ago it was 218, now it's 380 basically. Let's say it's all chemicals and.
So that's the one that we now pay, remember, we used to haul the
Right.
sludge ourselves, jump in if I'm wrong, but
Right.
we now contract that, that's at
Contract
biosolids disposal.
Yeah.
So in '24, we were not paying that
Gotcha.
cost, in
It's-
fiscal '24.
Synagro went up in their fees 55%.
Yeah.
So we got hammered hard last year, that's what happened.
But we did that because the process became too difficult for us to do it, to truck it out. So-
Well, we would need to buy a new truck,
We
so it was a
would-
balance.
Oh, that's
The
right.
truck was dying,
Yeah.
That's what it
yeah,
was.
the truck was
There's really
dying.
only one company, right, that does it, or?
Really not many.
Yeah.
Synagro is the only place that will take our biosolids, and then we only got, what, 2 bids on the hauling
Yeah.
itself, so.
And just so everyone knows, the conversion to doing a third-party hauling has been working out fabulously.
Yeah.
They're there before the plant opens, they're doing all the work, it seems like it's just effortless.
Yep.
Yeah, so far.
The chemical increase, just so you guys could, understand the volume of the chemicals we do use here. We use anywhere from 72,000 to 80,000 gallons of methanol per year. We're using 20 to 25,000 gallons of alum sulfate, 20 to 25,000 gallons of ferric, numerous tons of polymer for our solids dewatering, hypochlorite for cleaning the disc filters, and with the denitrification building coming up on 20 years of age, you lose efficiency, you have to use more methanol to eliminate your nutrients. So it's just par for the course of increasing the chemical budget because we do use a lot of chemicals in Cheshire.
Is that, in years past, we've had a lot of big rainstorms and stuff, right? So does that increase the amount of chemicals or not necessarily?
Not really, no. We tend to tone back the chemicals, but at that point, you're wasting them.
We don't wanna waste it, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if I
Pull back.
Adjust for that.
if I anticipate a rainstorm, I'll tend to lower it, because it's not gonna matter at that point.
Right, okay. You could name another 10 chemicals I would never start
I figured out.
Keep going, Dave.
They're all important.
You got 'em.
Sounds great.
Yeah, the methanol is what really, 80,000 gallons a year just to remove the nitrogen, it's a lot.
Any other questions regarding the operator?
There was one quick thing. Was there an issue with the state gauge again? Did I hear that? Was there, with the prison? Was there any issues with that, or we're up to?
Well, the flow meter has been installed, it's working, we're documenting, metering everything. However, there is an excessive amount of flow that's going through that system. And it's quite a bit, and it really is one of the major factors, we believe, of the INI issue. One of the major ones.
So is there a way we can start getting?
The answer to your question is not right now. So what we're doing is we want to wait for the analysis from Wright Pierce, our consultants, and document it first. And once we have it documented, then we're actually going to go to the next step and find out how to go to the state and determine how we can get up there and try to.
Jim's got some experience with that, so.
Yeah, 'cause this is
We
the,
did
Over the
that,
years.
we did that once, and that's how we smoothed the debt service curve for the,
Got a
for the
big-
new plant here, so.
Big
Yeah,
settlement
anything we
for,
can whack the state for, I'm absolutely in favor of.
this is the first year we have a working meter,
Oh,
at the prison. It was not working for, 2 years.
why?
I would email them on a monthly basis, weekly basis, and they told me they're on a purchasing freeze and couldn't buy the meter. But now they put the brand new meter in, and, you know, we check it every Monday and every Friday, we get a reading from it. When it doesn't rain and it's dry, it's flowing at about 300 gallons a minute. After these rainstorms, it was flowing at 650 gallons a minute, so it doubled.
Wow.
What were you estimating it to be?
I mean,
It shouldn't be that, it shouldn't be a dramatic difference, that's all.
no,
Yeah, it's
it
just-
shouldn't double on a
There's
rainstorm.
cyanide
Yeah.
Yeah.
on their
Yeah.
property.
Yeah,
It's
there's,
big, that's a
So if you do the
Yes.
650 times 14, 40 minutes in a day, they were sending us close to 1 million gallons a day.
So we're gonna have to get them to start coughing up some money.
It could be catch basins tied right into the system, probably, you know.
it just rounds
Just
off
don't
to
know.
15 million.
But we
Yeah,
don't
tell
have
me
any
it was
authority to
15
go
million.
on site either, so it's,
It's hard to investigate
Yeah.
the property.
Yeah,
we
Sounds
can't
like
it
set
is.
a camera, we can't.
Sounds
Yep.
like if they haven't put a meter in for a while too, that's a back charge issue we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, we've been charging them every year. They've been paying over $1 million in fees every year.
That's based on gallonage or based on just a simple agreement?
That's based on an assumption, no, it's based on a calculation I came up with.
Yeah.
And how close is that to like the base flow that you're getting versus the increased flow with I&I, do you know?
Well, based on the numbers we're getting, we probably were still undercharging them. But I don't know
At
that
least now
until
we
we get a
could,
full
at least
year.
now we could bill them.
Yeah, I'll know this year once.
Yeah.
But with the I&I, I mean, it sounds like they've gotta fix it, that's the most important thing.
Well, that's what we were hitting on, was the I&I. I came up with a calculation based
Yeah.
on something, and it was, you know, stuck at the
Well, that's.
And they write the
it's-
check there
it's
and blink.
news, it's
Yeah.
good, it's good news, yeah.
But you also.
Yeah, I'm all set there.
Speaking of I&I then, that started, correct? The, and,
March 3rd.
okay.
And there's how many
Any,
meters? There's
anything?
32
Yeah,
meters.
32 meters, yeah.
Yeah.
They've been
Okay.
here every
It's a
week.
10-week program.
Get enough rain
The
yet or
first
not?
week it started, we had the major storm event, so
Yeah.
it was ideal, so it was like perfect
Yeah.
timing. So we've already had two or three storms, so we're in.
So more to come then, it's too early to tell.
It's too early.
Yeah. Okay, good.
When we get to capital, you'll see there's an additional appropriation to make sure we have enough to cover that entire, our share of that entire agreement we have with the state. So we'll get to that.
I was gonna say, yeah, if that's on the revenue side, if we think it's gonna be higher than whatever we've been charging them, maybe we boost that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go into anything until we actually get it documented. from
Yeah,
our consultant.
till we have a
See
good
what we're
grip
doing.
on it, yeah.
Anything else on operating?
Okay, so capital, I know we have time for capital, I'm just throwing you some highlights I just wanted to discuss. So when you have time to think about it, we can review this at a later date. This is not everything that is in the book. Like I said, this is just highlights, I just want to do a quick discussion on it. I'm gonna start from the bottom up, since we're on the topic with the wastewater treatment plant. We have asked for HVAC upgrades, for $350,000 for this building, the admin building.
We did not turn the heat up.
I was gonna say, is that why
I
you
know what
turned the
you're
heat up
thinking.
today to
We
prove?
have
know
not
what
been
you're
thinking. So Dave can go into a little bit
That's
deeper
what
with
I wanted.
with cost.
Yeah.
Well, I'm feeling bad because I moved it out a year, as you see there on the right-hand side.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm asking to
trying to fund for it.
move that back if at all possible. The reason is that Dave, if you would take this, know how much the expenses are.
Yeah, so this building, the admin building has been without heat since probably late October. We've been getting by with space heaters. We have an LG system that nobody can seem to figure out. I'm told by NEC, who does our HVAC, that there is one LG tech in the state that can work on this system and has, I guess, the programming to fully repair it. Year to date, we have spent $40,000 in repairs for our HVAC, and it still doesn't work.
Was the LG put in when the plant was
Yeah.
redone?
Yeah. Yes.
It's just this one building.
Say no more.
This
All the
building, the
buildings.
watering building has it, the influent building has the LG system. And then the ops building, during the upgrade, the town of Cheshire used a plant effluent water system that is also a fail.
Which heats the building through the
Yeah.
use of
Yeah.
the effluent, and it's.
Which is a concern that came up during our.
Yeah.
So, if you remember
our-
last
our
year.
review with Amoresco, yeah.
So last year in the budget.
It's like effluent, okay. Heat pump, huh?
Last year, in the budget, we did have an appropriation for HVAC repairs, for the operations building. And that was, required because of our new, SCADA system that's in there. We have to make sure that that is climate controlled. So that is underway, it's working. But this next one is just, this building alone is the admin building, so.
350,000 just for this building, huh?
That, it's covering, design as well, yeah.
How many square feet is the building?
I don't know.
Isn't it large?
Yeah.
But also
What is
here,
that, what is that involved in? I mean, it's just,
so, in year 2, we also had another value for doing the remaining buildings. So the balance of anything that was not spent on this one would be carried over. We don't have concrete numbers, but we threw out a budget line to have something on the table. Moving up, so Cheshire Street sidewalk improvements. This has been on a 5-year capital plan for some time. Sean did not have any numbers on the line item, so it just got me wondering, and just asking the question, should this be removed from the 5-year capital plan, or is there going to be some, then in the future? I just didn't know how you wanted to move on. You don't have to answer it now, but just something to think about what to do with this one line item.
Big TBD there.
It's a big TV,
Yeah.
yeah. It has been designed, but it is now estimated about $585,000, which is obviously a referendum item, which I was not excited to have too many of those in this budget.
Yeah.
So, but to Merrick's point, I did not put it in and out year either. I just, we have to decide what we want to do. We've had a lot of other, I think, sidewalk expansion priorities come up since this was first proposed. So obviously Jarvis Marion, petition for Lanyon again, and some others that I think at least there's more active community interest in. I just don't know. We had some resistance on this when we had the hearing. We also had some folks in favor of it, certainly. But my 2 cents is just if we, I think prioritizing connecting to schools is a little higher than connecting to parks. I'd love to do it all, but it all comes at an expense. So in this case, it's, again, just a reminder, it's Cheshire Street to basically where we are right now in the big park. But with Lanyon, Jarvis, those are where I focus the dollars on capital ask. And we do have to have a conversation, decision about whether we just want to pause this indefinitely or come back to something. But it is designed, that's the one thing that's working.
It is, yeah, it is fully designed, ready to go, it's just on the shelf.
Could wait for another steep grant opportunity or something in the future. if we want
I was
to.
gonna say, it was designed so we can at least have this little shovel-ready thing.
Yeah, I kinda like it still on there, just see if it's not.
I just wanted to bring it to the
Yeah,
table.
because one of the things I see, you have the East Mitchell Road reconstruction, but at the same time, I think we have to look at that sidewalk area where, I mean, Jim and I have brought this up before about the sidewalk going up down to Highland and the one going across from Stop and Shop. I'd be curious to find out, because now we have school buses going to East Mitchell and to Pondview Apartments to pick up the kids to take them to Highland because there's no sidewalk. What's the difference would we save in terms of, buses and things like that if we did have the sidewalks going down there? But I know that, John had, a couple years ago brought up the issue with the sidewalk. And I know it's a steep thing right across from Stop and Shop.
Well, since you,
That's the
so,
design.
since you jumped the gun, we'll go right to East Mitchell.
Okay.
So, that sidewalk you're talking about along Highland, that's gonna be the connector from East Mitchell to go, in both directions to, Chase Bank one way and to Hinman Road the other way. It's already designed, there's 2 different sections, east and west, north and south, which, when we do bid it, we'll have 2 different prices. We
So that's the
determine-
road reconstruction?
No, that's just the sidewalk.
Okay.
Road reconstruction is the road.
So
We'll
it
get to
is,
that next.
it is fully designed, it is in front of the DOT right now for their review.
Okay.
All right, and approval. Once we get that, I do believe last year we did receive, an appropriation for
We do.
sidewalk,
we have money.
improvement for that sidewalk.
Okay.
If it all goes to the plan.
There's an appropriation for
You
the
did
budget
last
from
year,
last year for
yeah,
that?
because we did the sidewalk
The whole
extension
thing or
program.
just the one direction?
It was for, well, we don't know, because we don't know the pricing yet, but I have it broken up so we can decide.
We had a sidewalk maintenance program, a sidewalk extension program, and we had.
Well, technically, the kids from, at least from East Mitchell, if there was any, could cross the street at Hinman, walk down the sidewalk, and then cross back.
But cross
If
it
they-
back, yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
ideally, it would be nice to have the sidewalk going straight down the Highland, but, I mean,
It's not gonna go across
The
the
longer
from East
stretch,
Mitchell,
yeah.
directly across, it cannot.
No.
right, no, I
Called a
know
mid-block
that, yeah,
crossing, and that's
Yeah.
frowned upon by.
yeah. There's already a stop, a push button thing for it to cross
Yeah.
anyway, so.
But right now, we just go down to the, the first
Inman.
commercial, yeah, across from him and whatever that Delucia built, whatever it is that's in there, that, down there.
That's not, I don't think that's a good.
No, so if you're in East Mitchell and you're going
Yeah.
towards Highland, you can go
Right.
left or right? So I have a sidewalk design both directions.
Got it, but I mean, but going how far down towards Highland?
Well, it's gonna go down to Hinman,
What are you talking about?
Just to him,
to Hinman,
Right,
and then
just
the
to
other
the-
side is to, the connector at Chase Bank.
right,
Remember the sidewalk stubbed right there because of the steep bank?
So
right,
you're only thinking of him and that, so you can't go on the sidewalk all the way to the school then, with
not
that?
yet,
No,
not with this project.
You still have to go further.
That's what Don said, you go to, you
Because
go
the-
down to
yeah,
the plaza that's, you
the
know,
hill
the
there.
commercial
Yeah.
building there, take a left, cross,
Okay, I see. what
So
you're saying.
currently,
go
the
across,
students,
go down and come across with the school.
the students at East Mitchell, who live at East Mitchell and Pondview Apartments, they now have buses picking them up to take them to Highland until there's a sidewalk there.
And some were going via Castle
Yes,
Glen.
yeah, Castle.
Castle Glen, but the folks
They're
in
not-
that association don't want that to happen,
And
so they like.
Since we're on that topic, so the Weeks Road intersection realignment, that is also under design, that is, gonna be shipped to DOT for their initial review once I finalize my review. Part of that design shows a sidewalk along Highland connecting Weeks Road to, the apartments, Highland Apartments.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Trying to incorporate as part of the
Pondview,
intersection
yeah.
plan.
So we had an opportunity to have it incorporated as part
So
of the
now-
design.
so now we have another about 100 feet we have to figure out.
Then you got just that little spot in the middle then, how about
Yeah.
5 properties or something, or, yeah.
At least there's no kids between them.
Yeah, I know,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, from East Mitchell, they did, they had to walk, they.
Oh, that's true,
yeah.
that's true.
So, back to East Mitchell, so I did receive, 2 calls already from, the residents, one from, Cheshire Hillside, is it Hillside?
Yeah,
Yes.
Hillside Village, yeah.
Yeah, so they're wondering when the road is gonna be redone. So now the development that's at the end of the cul-de-sac on East Mitchell is complete. To move forward, we'd like to get that road, reconstructed. I had it in the budget, and Sean did move it to year 2, just the design portion. I'm asking if we could just think about just the design, not the construction, and move that forward so we can get something on the table for next year, or maybe the following year, but.
Is the road in bad shape?
Yes.
I wish we could do it all, but this will be a theme throughout the capital, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of great requests in the first year.
Cause I remember,
But it's in very rough shape.
I mean, Jim, you and I dealt with a situation there last year and the year before, where water was coming,
Yeah, that is not
coming into Hillside from that. And I mean, obviously that's something, so obviously this.
Yeah, that has nothing to do
That
with
has
that
nothing to do
issue.
with-
That was,
Right.
that was something else. That was due to a
hasn't
plug
been a
culvert.
recurring issue.
Yeah, so far, yeah, I haven't heard it coming back, but
I think the culvert maybe they can clean
I
that.
think the culvert has been maintained better now, but also now the construction is done.
That's the full reconstruction with design and everything, you can't just replace the pavement or anything? there?
No, it's gonna need new drainage and curbing. Yeah, it's all.
Wow.
And we left it that way because of the construction equipment that was going back and forth for development in the back.
Yeah.
But if at all possible, if we could just look at, maybe if there's room for it, now, then we'll push it off.
Yeah, again, it's 40,000 for just the design, I'm sorry.
And that's just an estimation.
Right, I think the project's estimated at 300,000 in addition to that 40,000, but yeah, I certainly would support putting the 40,000 back in year 1 if we want to design it now. It's my capacity to do so, which is great. It is rough, I drove it just the other day, it's very much in need. And now that the construction's fully done.
It is
It's a
fully
good
done.
time.
I walk it all the time, it's fine. Just kidding.
Okay.
I do walk it a lot and it's easy to walk.
Yeah.
It is-
Also on the list, you'll see I have intersection improvements for Elm Street. You can just ignore that one. That was just a pipe dream. I really hate that intersection. So I really would like to work.
Academy and.
Yeah.
Element Academy.
Element Academy, yeah,
So
so
more
that,
people stop on Academy all the time whenever I'm coming up to go left, because they are afraid to turn in there, it's so narrow.
so that's just something to think about down the road, I'd
Yeah.
like to hit that one. Mansion Road Bridge improvements, I asked for 10,000 for a design analysis. We can remove that completely from the capital. I found money somewhere else in a different budget line, I used it already, so we can just ignore it and remove it, so John, I don't know who does that, if you wanna
Yeah, no, we
make that here.
But the project still has it, I mean, the project's like 1 point.
The project is still the project,
$1.6
yes,
million
yeah.
dollars or so.
And hopefully we're gonna get state funding for that one, but that's,
We'd be
the
eligible.
analysis first to see what's happening. And the last one I have is really the big one, is our pavement management program. We had asked for a little over 2 million, and Sean did drop it down to 400,000. Now, we currently have a surplus in our accounts of approximately $2.1 million for paving. That paving is earmarked for the 2025 paving program. We have estimated at over 1.8 million. That leaves us 300,000 of surplus that would go forward. Adding to what Sean is saying is 400,000 would leave us 700,000 in a road improvement program. You are not gonna have a lot of roads being done next year.
You're already starting, aren't you? I think I've seen you cutting for catch basin
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, no, we already have our list. I think I shared that with you at one point, Sean.
I'll forward that on to the council.
Yeah.
The list for this up, and it is a bigger list than in some years.
Yes.
It is an extensive, so the caveat to that is just between the 2 years, the reason I cut this to 400,000 is really twofold. If you take, in an average year, we've approved about $1.6 to $1.7 million a year in capital. As Merrick said, we have the balance of the East Johnson, if you recall last time we did the East Johnson Road last section, we merged together so it was one budget question, both the East Johnson
Yeah.
full depth and the regular paving program, I'll call it. Because we do have a favorable balance there, combined with the prior appropriations, as you said, 2.1 million. If you kind of take those all together plus this and divide it in two, you get roughly 1.6 million between the two. So we are doing a lot of additional paving in this upcoming spring. But part of the advantage of the 400,000 is to have one less budget referendum question this year. We certainly could increase it, but Merrick's right, if we do the ambitious program we have this current year, we'll be doing less than the following year, and that's just ultimately a policy decision. As I've said many times before, in a dream scenario, we wouldn't be bonding for this. We do it every year. I'd love to see it in the operating budget. One day we'll get it there, but we can't just add, $1.5 million to our operating budget. But it is difficult to know that over the course of 20 years, just remember, we are paying an extra 40% for all of this because we're borrowing
Yep.
at 4%
Money.
or not.
And part of that is we're in that line item. We're paving, we're milling, we're chip sealing, crack sealing, we're doing catch basin repairs, ramp repairs, so police detail. So there's a lot of expenses that are involved in that program itself. So it's not just purely paving, there's a lot of different aspects that be involved. So we try to spread it all out and make it work and, just think about it.
So don't lose those, more to come on capital, because we'll do that after, but a lot of it, I think, is gonna be based on how much we can clean up, and then, when we do our look forward and when we set the year one stuff, which is gonna be after the end of April, we'll talk more
Appreciate that, yeah.
and see if we can, squeeze, because it sounds like you're at 700,000 now
Yeah,
with what Sean gave you and what the carryover is, so, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and that's why I have it just as a highlight, just to get you all thinking about it, so when the time comes, we
Yep.
can, revisit this, and whatnot.
And if you don't mind, if you can just get a little summary of what your consultant or your installer is proposing for $350,000 here, just because I'm curious as to.
No, absolutely, so we have a consultant already trying to give us that estimate, however, he's been ghosting us for over a month and a half now,
They were here this week.
I wanted to get something in the budget line item, and
That's all right. I'm
obviously,
just curious what
I'll
their
tell you that
vision-
number.
What their vision is,
Yeah.
what they're gonna do for.
No, absolutely.
else?
I think we're good on public comment too, unless, nothing, Gina?
I'm all set. And the next page is, if you look just far, it's just some objectives that the engineering department would like to look at.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yep.
That's all it is.
Could I ask one other thing that's semi-related to this, just because, and I know it's, this issue relative to the post office pickup on newly constructed subdivisions? Is there a policy that you're aware of that the post office is, or the postal service is kind of going by, that they're deciding when they pick up versus
They
when?
make it up as they go, I think.
No, so the funny is, and I just saw it in my email today, was that there actually is a guideline by the postal service that developers is supposed to contact them directly to discuss how to do that. And reading through it, it does seem like they need to put in a community box.
So there's a community box, even if it's a public street?
I-
I've heard that now by
I,
one or two people saying that they've heard that.
we're having an
that's
issue with
a new
Spring
policy.
Oaks, and that is a big one right there.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
the
my
one.
understanding, and again, I'm similar cursory understanding is that in that situation, developers should have created a community box during construction and then transitioned to individual boxes.
Is that-
From what
I
heard,
don't know.
In this situation, for some reason, the neighbors didn't want a community box or something, is what I was told. I don't know how,
I don't know.
if that's accurate.
They probably would take one now that they're
Yeah,
going
sure
to
they would.
Wallingford
I
every
think for,
day.
right, for
Yeah.
temporarily or for whatever that is, 18 months or 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think we're all learning a lot about it
Yes.
in a very recent amount of time.
Because
It's
this
been
has
an
never
issue.
come up in any
No.
other,
We have Michael Place, Balsam Place, both that were
Yeah.
constructed, they both have mailboxes, doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, does not make sense.
Well,
I just don't know.
it's that, and Peter, you may be more aware of it, it sounds like you are, as to what is going on with the postal service and the changes that they're making and what's envisioned for us on a
It's-
longer term, and
yeah,
do we
yeah.
have any say or do we have any input in this process? Because I have to tell you, on
It's
an
the
individual
feds.
basis, because
Yeah.
I'm a little more traditional,
Yeah.
I see a lot more lost mail in Cheshire than I've ever seen before. Both my own personal and people complaining that they've had things that have been lost, et
Yeah.
cetera. So I think the confusion here between where our mail is being processed, et cetera, is starting to affect. And I suspect more and more of our residents may be concerned about it. I don't know. Do we have any idea what they're doing? I mean, what the.
I heard it's being processed in Wallingford.
No, but what they're doing long-term for, in terms of the postal service, we don't have, and we
No.
have no say in this process.
No, we haven't for years and years and years, even, 25, 30 years ago, we were trying to get a separate post office that it was off of
I-
Maple
I
Avenue
know, I
and
remember, yeah.
everything else. It's been, we've
The
been
postal service
fighting
doesn't
this
talk to us
for,
as a municipality, they just don't talk to us?
yeah.
Don't they own that property next to the bowling alley? Isn't that?
Yeah, that was one I remember.
That was- yeah.
Oh, yeah, right on
Yep.
Route 10.
Just to add to the mix there, we've been after them to try to get the mailbox relocated from the site on Wallingford Road into the cul-de-sac,
Next to
Yeah.
town hall.
into the town hall, and
Yeah.
again, we're just not getting any
Yeah.
response.
Yep,
Strawberry frustrating. It is.
yes.
Yeah, in the new box, you can't enter in now from the street.
They came and flipped that.
Oh, they
So
did?
it's on the
So
side.
now you can't?
No, they flipped it to the way it is now.
Oh, to the way it is now?
It was working fine
Yeah.
before. One day they were up.
They flipped it.
This is the wrong
So-
way.
oh, I thought you guys did that. I thought the town flipped it.
We can't touch a box.
No, I was just, okay,
Yeah,
because I wasn't sure.
so I don't even know why it's there.
I'll tell you exactly. It appears to be a drive up that you can't use.
You
as
can't
a-
drive up to.
Right, it's fine.
Driving a sidewalk.
Ironically, it
Well,
happened at the
that's-
same time
Yeah, 'cause
as
that's
our
the
road
argument.
crew.
Yeah.
My wife was all mad, she's like, why
Yeah.
did the town, she's mad about the whole project,
That
but
box
neither is
though,
the-
because
she's
of
mad
the
like,
new
why did
system,
they not?
literally have to
I
get
have
out
to
the
be able to
car.
drive
door.
up to it. I have to,
Well, who
yeah.
flipped it?
yeah.
And she-
One day, I was literally being in the parking lot, getting in my car, and I saw somebody out there. I was hoping they were moving it. All they did was move it and reinstall it, facing the wrong way.
So now you can walk up to it from the town hall, but you can't drive up.
You can't drive up to it unless you drive
Get out
up
of
and then
your
get
car.
out of
Get
your
out of your
car
car
and
and-
walk over to
It's
the
not a
other
parking
side.
spot. The whole point is it's supposed to be.
They will be moved.
Right.
The town has no liaison with the postal service.
Other
No.
than our federal delegation, but,
And what's happening at the federal level right now, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I
who
mean,
knows what.
You got enough stuff to worry about. No,
No, this goes back years and years and years and years
and even years.
and years. Good?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
then-
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Merrick, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
David, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, again, hosting. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
All right.
Done.